Hi there, and thank you very much for tuning in. My name is Louis Strong, and you are listening to Headstrong. This is season 3 of my podcast, called Creatives in Conversation. With the turmoil of 2020, I wanted to take some time to sit down with a variety of creatives to talk about their experiences so far this year, including with coronavirus and the Black Lives Matter movement. But I also wanted to talk to them about their journeys to how they've got to where they are today, including all the highs and lows to reach that success. This podcast is about inspiring you, the listener, to understand what it means to be headstrong. And to me, it means to believe in yourself, to talk about your vulnerabilities, and reinforce your self-worth. This is episode 3 of season 3. And I am delighted to share with you an insightful and stimulating conversation with filmmaker, director, stylist and writer Basma Khalifa. Now, Basma has a rich and colourful CV with a vast array of work, much like her own journey and upbringing. Most notably, she created a documentary for the BBC about exploring her roots in Saudi Arabia, where some of her family still live today. I really hope you enjoy this conversation, and if you do, please do leave a review. Enjoy. Hello, Basma.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining me on Headstrong. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm quite excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. I mean, I think it's a very interesting time to be having a conversation with someone of your background, upbringing, and everything that you've been up to in the last kind of few years. I mean, there's so much that we can talk about on top of your own interests and inspirations and whatnot. But if you're happy to have this conversation, then let's crack on.
Yeah. I have to say that you are the questions, because obviously you pre-sent me questions, and I was like, this guy has done his research. I was like, this is my entire background. Am I that visible on the internet that you know so much? I was like,
I do not leave many stones left unturned, I've got to say. But I mean, I hope what we're going to talk about today captures a little bit of everything about you. Just because I like to talk about a lot of different things, but also just kind of, you know, touch on the important stuff as well.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, just from like talking to you now, though, I mean, the most striking thing for me, particularly, is your accent.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, I mean, I would probably. I don't know what people say to you. I would probably use the term international accent. But you,
international, interesting.
I mean, you were born in Saudi. You moved to Ireland. You've lived in Scotland. I mean, what is that that timeline? How would you?
Yeah.
What would you describe your accent?
Yeah. Well, I guess I was born in Saudi Arabia, and then I'm originally from Sudan, born in Saudi Arabia, and I grew up in Northern Ireland until I was about 12, I'd say 12, 13, and then I moved to Scotland. I was in a little town called Dumfries for 3 years, and then I went to uni, or 4 years, and then I went to uni in Scotland, in Glasgow, for 3 years, and then I moved to New York, and then I moved to London. So, yeah, okay, we'll go international, I guess.
I mean, but you've previously talked about your own identity on podcasts and interviews, and of course on your documentary, which is what has made you more noticeable in the public eye on the BBC, called Inside the Real Saudi Arabia, which we will come on and talk about. Of course, we could not leave that stone unturned. But I have heard you mention before on a platform that you wanted to be a Blue Peter presenter, which of course is a massive part of like a 90s or noughties childhood. Where did your passion to work in the creative industry stem from?
I think I've just always been a bit of a loudmouth. What I liked about Blue Peter, in my yearbook in high school, my most likely to be was a Blue Peter presenter, because I think that I have always had a very like inquisitive nature, and I loved Blue Peter. I loved that they used to go to places and talk to people and do things that weren't just entertainment TV, because I think even though I probably have a personality that works for entertainment TV, I just wanted to do something that had a bit of a messaging. And I think that's where Blue Peter came in, because it was the one TV show when we were kids that I was like, oh, like I'm learning something, but it's like fun. So I guess I was a loudmouth. I always just talked. I was a talker. My dad always says you were the one I wasn't worried about between you and your two brothers, because you don't stop talking. So I guess always from birth, maybe.
So maybe even at school, it was never a far-fetched idea that you were going to be in a creative in some way, and it was never a dream that was too far out of reach.
Well, no, to be honest, actually, it was never in the forefront of my mind. I wanted to be a primary school teacher. I wanted to work with kids. I wanted to work in a nursery. I just always loved, I'm very maternal in that sense. Like I've always just wanted to be around babies. And then I had a summer in Sudan with a really awful little cousin. I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this full time. I can't be around kids that are, maybe some kids aren't nice. I don't want to do this full time. And actually, media came in quite late. I was just doing my UCAS forms, applying for universities, and I looked at a fashion business course that was primarily from a business school from my very conservative parents who were just like, you need to study something that will actually get you a degree with fashion elements. And it sort of started from there. But I was in fashion. I did fashion for my whole career. Media and sort of TV and radio has only come in the last 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we'll definitely talk about like your journey into the creative industries, particularly into fashion and then PR work and whatnot. But I mentioned identity there and voice, and they're very much intertwined, and you have to have a synergy between identity and voice. So what is your definition of identity, and what are the key principles and qualities you think one should kind of retain when it comes to your own identity?
I think identity, the beautiful thing about identity is it's a very individual thing. No one has the same identity, nor are they meant to. So for me, when it comes to identity and the way I even identify myself, I just think how I see myself and how I perceive myself, and also how I present myself publicly, is very individual to me. And I think once you can embrace that, you can sort of like get through life a bit easier because you can understand yourself. I think identity is all about understanding, if I'm honest, understanding who you are and how you position yourself. I think a lot of people, and myself included, I struggled with my identity because I never really grew up anywhere where I was like, could maybe go on a discovery that only sort of happened when I moved to New York and then London. So I think that I've only really started to understand my identity in the last maybe couple of years, which considering I've been alive for 30 years, it's quite a long time. But I really love where I'm at now because I'm still on this like figuring out who I am as a Black woman, as a woman, and especially in the climate we're in right now, it's ongoing in my mind. Identity is ongoing because it changes with every experience you have.
Exactly. I think identity it's a journey, and one that is ongoing until the day that we're no longer here. You are constantly interpreting your experiences and things that have happened in your past, but also how your future can also shape you, your surroundings, everything.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree.
You seem like extremely positive, outgoing, but you're like very calm, collected as well. You've talked about having a big mouth maybe when you were younger as well.
Yeah.
Did you? So you said that you struggled a little bit with your own identity growing up. Did it mentally affect you? Because obviously mental health when we were growing up wasn't necessarily as a topical conversation as it is now. But of course, that doesn't take away the importance of what could have been. What we are experiencing when we're growing up. So did it affect you in that way? Did you experience any kind of loneliness or just struggled with your identity itself?
You know what? Growing up in Northern Ireland was very interesting because I think that you can't miss what you don't know. So as much as it was like, yeah, I'd love to, did I see things and then feel like I missed out or anything? We didn't have Instagram. We didn't have really Facebook. We didn't have any of these social things. So I didn't know any different. I didn't know what life was like outside my very white Irish bubble. So I couldn't sort of be like, I miss something or I don't understand something because I couldn't see it to miss it. So in that sense, I didn't struggle with identity until maybe social media started happening. And especially when I moved to London, I was like, something for me doesn't click. I love my friends, but there is a disparity between being Black and white that I think there's just certain experiences that they don't understand that I go through in everyday life when it comes to racism. And there's experiences that maybe I don't understand of theirs. And that is genuinely culture and race of things you don't understand. So I think definitely, I don't think I struggled when I was younger because I don't think I knew the difference, but I think I struggled more as an adult. And I think it affected me more, as my mental health suffered a lot more as an adult because I felt a little bit lost in who I was and who I was trying to be. So I'd still say a
lot of people have that relationship with social media because as soon as it's such a beast. I mean, you can be absorbed and sucked in, and you can devote your life to something like that, and that can really really affect you mentally for sure. And I completely agree. But I mean, it also gave you a platform to share your voice. So with all its shortcomings, there are some, of course, benefits to social media, which I would argue as well. But when you started to find your own identity and voice, did this come from your kind of personality of getting into the creative industries? I know you did your business degree, but then you started doing fashion and exploring your creative abilities. Did that contribute to your voice and identity?
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. I think that going into fashion, I did PR in New York for a little while, which was incredible. I was actually part of an agency called People's Revolution, which at the time was on an MTV show as well. So there's an element of being on MTV at the same time as actually working in PR. And then I left New York because it just wasn't, I was too young to be there, and I already knew very early on that I'd get swallowed up by that city if I stayed. So I moved to London and sort of went through PR and sort of started understanding myself, because I was like, I'm way too selfish for PR. It's a very selfless thing, PR. You really have to care about other people. And I do, of course, but not like to an extent where I feel like I could promote them well, because I didn't even really know how to promote myself. So then I went into styling. And I think styling is where I suddenly slowly started figuring out who I was and what identity was, because clothes just had such a heavy meaning in my own culture, let alone in Western culture. And then I guess that's how TV happened. I think with TV, I always said I wanted to do TV, but I never wanted to do TV unless I had a message and I had a voice and I had something to say. So I went on a little like self-discovery for 2 years, I guess. And then I was like, okay, this is what it means to be Black. This is what it means to be a woman. This is what it means to be a Black woman. This is what it means to be Muslim and Black and a woman, and all these different strands of who I am. And it's slowly getting to that. I was like, okay, now I feel I can have a voice. But it's funny when you said, social media gave me a voice or gave me a things to talk about things that matter to me. I never positioned myself like that. I never was like, these are the things that matter and these are the things I'm going to talk about. I just talk. Like I just say stuff that I think about. It's not controlled enough to think about, if you know what I mean.
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, what I meant with the social media comment is it's just another route for freedom of speech. Really and it's just another place to share your thoughts, no matter how they come out, whether they're collected or just,
or Kanye, or whether they're collected or Kanye.
Yeah, collected or Kanye. I might get that on a t-shirt. Yeah. That's nice. I like that. But let's look at New York there for a second. So, and also London. What you've just talked about, big cities there briefly. What you were doing. You were working in New York.
Do you know what? New York is very different. New York is definitely the city that doesn't sleep. It just never stopped. And I think I didn't love PR that much. And I find this isn't even to do with being Black or to be with being a woman. The New York personality is very different. American personality to British personality. I grew up Irish. I'm so sarcastic. I'm so dry. I'm so like that wit that I think British people have, but almost Irish people have more. I just would say things, and my New York friends I'd made would be like, I don't understand. Are you like joking? Because that's like not funny. And I was like, no, it's definitely a joke. It's sarcasm. Like I'm definitely being sarcastic. And they were like, well, that's not funny. And I was like, oh, we have a genuine sense of humor issue that I think actually makes a huge difference in British sensibilities because we're so dry. So I found that quite tricky because I was like, how do you click? I realized that actually in the UK we click over humor. And it's not maybe the same in the States.
Yeah, there's a cultural divide, isn't there? I mean, it's just the way that comedy is very much shaped over there. Also, I feel like quite often they don't. Have you ever? I mean, on Netflix, there's a load of American comedians, and on there's a load of British comedians. The crudeness and like the swearing and some of the British stuff, I find hilarious. Yeah. But then on the American stuff, they'll make jokes out of like, the most. I don't know.
It's even on chat shows here, like when Americans come to do chat shows, and I used to watch like Graham Norton or Jonathan Ross or whatever, and they always used to say, like, Americans used to be like, oh my God, we can swear here? Because we're just right. Like, whatever, like who cares? It's not politics for us. So New York definitely, it was a journey, but for me, New York was a big identity hit because it's the first time I'd been anywhere that was very culturally diverse. Coming,
Sure.
yeah, going from Northern Ireland and Scotland to there, I was like, I remember phoning my dad and I was like, there's all sorts of people here. I was like, I'm sitting beside different people of different colors and different ethnicities. And my dad was like, yeah, that's the world. I was like, well, I don't know that's the world. Like, I didn't know what that meant. So that was definitely big for me. Well, I remember sitting on the tube in New York and Brooklyn and being like, there are so many different looking people on this tube. And I've never seen this.
I
So,
think, yeah, as you say, living in the cities, it's allowed you to explore and see more. And again, that's a part of discovering your identity. But
yeah,
you left PR work though.
yeah.
And that PR work, as you have said, was maybe rather draining and
Mm.
selfless. But I have no doubt that it probably allowed you to build up a roster of
Oh, yeah.
contacts.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that must have played a big part in the future, right?
100%. I mean, media, TV, fashion, whatever it is, it's all about who you know and how to get in. Of course, it's about how savvy and witty and whatever else you can be, but a huge part of it is about who you know. So I think that going to New York and being under People's Revolution, it was at the time it was quite big on MTV. So I could definitely use that as a pull when coming back to the UK because I was like, well, my boss was called Kelly Catrone. I've worked for this woman called Kelly Catrone, and everyone was like, whoa, like, because she was a big deal at the time. So I think that definitely that helped. But I also think that what helped was that I was very forthcoming personality wise. I always was, I always wanted to go the extra mile. I always wanted to do more. I always was like, I'll get the coffee, I'll get the dry cleaning, I'll do this, I'll do that. I was that girl that was like there. So that if anyone ever asked for anything, I'd be like, well, I can do it. Even if I didn't know how to do it, I was like, I can do it.
You were committed and you were all in. Yeah. And I think it's a very likable trait because no one likes someone who tries to stay back. You know what I mean? You want someone who's fully committed and 100% in. So let's talk about your journey to how the documentary came about. How did the documentary materialize? Who approached who? Was it your idea? Was it your concept? How did the BBC come to sort it out? How did it all come about? What was the journey? If you're allowed to talk about it.
Oh yeah, I'm totally allowed to talk about it. It's my journey.
Yeah.
So
Good. There we go.
So the documentary came about because I actually really started thinking about doing more and more TV, and I think a lot of people had said to me, you should consider doing entertainment TV. You should consider doing, This Mornings and all those kind of things. And I was like, I just feel like I want to do something else. So after I sort of figured out my voice a little bit, definitely went on a huge journey living in London and committing to experiencing being Black in London, which was a huge deal for me, and being around more Black people and having more Black friends and sort of seeing myself back was a really important part of my, progression and identity, definitely. And I think from there I was sort of like, okay, well, I feel like I have a voice now and I kind of can talk about things that I actually do care about that I didn't even realize I cared about. So it started off with me being on set one day. I was styling one day and I was talking to the agent of one of the celebrities. And I just was like, I was thinking about doing this thing or whatever. And she was like, two things. Like, she was like, first of all, you need a show reel because great that you want to make TV, but you kind of need to prove it. At this point, Instagram still wasn't, it was big, but not huge. Influencers weren't as big. I don't even think back then. So she was like, you need to make a show reel to show who you are and what you can do. And she was like, I advise you make that with a professional company, which in hindsight now probably was silly because it costed insane amount of money. And she was like, talk to people about what you want to do. And actually, that was my biggest learning curve in making the documentary, talking about it. Talk about what you want to do, because if you talk about it, people are going to be like, will be people that are like, oh yeah, I know someone who knows someone who knows someone. If you don't talk about things, no one can help you. So once I started talking, I made a show reel. Long story short, made a show reel. Started using that. I emailed a commissioner at BBC Three, and I can't believe he got back to me, but he did, and he was like, you sound great, and I really like your vibe, but you can't do things through a production company. TV doesn't work like that. You have to go to a production company, and they pitch sort of on your behalf, which I still think is kind of weird because I can pitch myself better than anyone else can pitch me. But whatever, that's the way they do things. So they were like, find some production company. So what I did is I used to watch loads of documentaries anyway, but I watched loads and loads of documentaries wrote down all the team of all the ones that I really liked how they were shot. And I just contacted everyone. I went on LinkedIn, I found emails, I emailed everyone, and I found a guy, an incredible exec called Mickey Minstrati, who at the time had made quite a lot of Stacey Dooley's programs. And I emailed him on LinkedIn. I added him and I was like, hi, I've got some ideas. He emailed me back literally within the hour and was like, let's talk. I went in and saw him the next morning. We talked for 3 hours and he was like, all this sounds amazing, but where did you start? Where is your journey? And I was like, well, I was born in Saudi Arabia, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, wait, stop. He was like, that's the story. When were you last there? And I was like, I haven't been there in like 25 years. And he was like, that's the storyline. That's it. You haven't been back to your mother country where you were born. You don't know what it was like. You don't know what it could have been like to live there. Let's get the ball rolling. But I have to say, and it only takes one person to truly, truly believe in you when you have nothing and you don't have, I'd never been on TV before, but he was like, I see something in you. At the time, I'd also completed a little course that BBC do, which is called Women in TV, where they try and get more women in TV. So I did a little bit of radio and I'd done a bit of BBC News and Women's Hour and all those things. So I had a little bit of, I guess, media knowledge. But yeah, we pitched it. The BBC declined it 4 or 5 times. We just kept
Really?
pitching it. Yeah, they were like, yeah, she's cool, but like, why her? Why now? Then it became why now? And then slowly, why now happened because the Saudi government got the new crown prince. And when they got the new crown prince, I was like, well, they're going to change the country, so that makes sense. This is why now. They still said no. And then I didn't run into him. I attended an event that the commission that we pitched to was at, and I cornered him in the last 30 seconds of the event. I was like, I've got an idea that I really need you to see. And he was like, I get 700 ideas like a week. I don't know what your idea is. And I was like, yeah, can I repitch it? And he's like, yeah, have Mickey email me. Mickey emailed him and it got greenlit within that week.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It goes to show actually that probably when you started pitching the show itself, maybe even the country Saudi Arabia itself was not ready for what you were going to produce and what the idea was. So actually timing is everything, and what was materialized. I mean, you can maybe give your elevator pitch on the documentary for anyone who hasn't watched it. But I have no doubt that people have of course seen it. But yeah, I mean that was a real platform and right time for you to do something like that.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with you. I 100% believe in the power of timing. It wasn't right for me to go when I pitched it, and I make it sound like such a warm story, but this was a 5-year process to getting it on the TV, and you have to see it out. You have to know that things do not happen overnight. And I struggled. I had no money. I couldn't really pay rent. I'd put everything into this. I concentrated on so much, and my family were like, listen, at some point you got to kind of think about other things to do. And I was like, no, I know I can do this, but it takes that strength because it's not an overnight success. That's for sure.
No, I mean, the creative industry is one of those places where it's so difficult to succeed. And of course, I commend you on the success of the documentary. It reached millions. It's been viewed by so many, picked up with the BBC, of course. And it's just going from strength to strength. What was that experience like? The pre-production, let's draw a line under those 5 years, which, must have been tough. But when you were shooting it and started thinking this is actually happening now, was that a bit of a whirlwind experience when it started, when the ball got rolling?
Yes and no. I mean, of course, the whole pre-production of everything is different when you're like, having to think of storylines and what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. But like, I went out there with Jess, who's incredible, my director, Jess, and it was just the two of us. And we went to Saudi and I stayed with my aunts. It was my family. It didn't feel weird. Jess was so, so incredible and sort of making it all seem very chill and very relaxed. I didn't feel really like the camera was there at all. But I was filming with my family. I felt like I was on holiday. It didn't feel that. It was intense and it was a bit stressful at times. But like, typical me, I didn't really think about the consequences of like opening my big mouth. I was just like, let's just go with this. And what happened. But I think what was the biggest thing for me is I wasn't prepared for the reaction. Sure. I don't think that's one thing they miss and probably people should tell you, is when you get into TV or any sort of media, it wasn't calculated to be famous. It was calculated because I wanted to share a story. So when it gave that sort of level of fame, I totally, and I don't know how, but I bypassed that would happen. So when people started contacting me and messaging me and the DMs and all the stuff, I was like, well, people are watching this? Totally went straight over my head that it was going to be super, super full on, and I would get a lot of like reaction from it. So I think that was a huge learning curve. I didn't really want to be in the public eye. That kind of wasn't my thing. I just wanted to create something. And I wish in hindsight that I had media trained or sought media training to know how to deal with being in the public, because that's not something that
I mean, there's a very, very delicate relationship between being on TV and in the public eye to being famous as well. It's so delicate. And actually, you say that you'd want to have learnt about that, but I don't think that anyone could probably train you, because as you say, every experience is unique and different. And no one will have released a documentary like you did about Saudi Arabia. So they probably couldn't tell you the feedback and the way that people are going to get in contact with you and what the your experiences with the public are going to be like after that. But it's certainly true. I mean, we've already talked about it. Look at Kanye West. Like, I mean, look, we all deal with fame in weird and mysterious, strange ways.
That's so true.
But when you got back home, without wanting to ruin the documentary for anyone who hasn't watched it, you did have to leave early from the country. Was a lot of the backlash when you got? Was that? I mean, were you scared when you had to leave and come back home?
So scared.
And even when you were back in England, were you kind of looking over your shoulder?
Oh yeah, no, I didn't leave my room for like 2 weeks. I had like PTSD. I came back with post-traumatic stress disorder because I literally was like, I don't know, are people watching me? Are people following me? Are people looking for me? Like, I was so scared. And also not just scared, but I was so gutted. I had been building up to this moment for 2-3 years, and just for it to fall flat in what felt like fall flat after 6 days was devastating. Everything I'd worked towards, my entire pinnacle of my career, I was like, this is it. This is the top. See you later. You have to leave the country. So I was devastated, and the BBC were like, there's no way you have enough content for a full-length documentary. There's no way. And I just thought, well, it's my fault. I did this. So yeah, it was hard. It was really hard.
What was that experience like then when you got back? Did you and it's Jess, right?
Yeah.
Did you and Jess watch all the footage and think, I can actually still make something here?
She definitely did. So I took 2 weeks off. Obviously, we both dealt with the trauma, and I took a full 2 weeks off and left London and went up and stayed with my family in Manchester just to sort of feel like I could collect myself. And then we came back and we sat in the edit, and bless her, she sat in the edit, my editor sat in the edit, my exec. They all had this amazing little team. And that's, I think, the beauty in doing it with a small production team, because it becomes like this little family, which are like cocooning you and protecting you as opposed to like a big engine. But she's incredible. Like, there's no documentary without Jess. She's the reason I have a documentary, because she caught things I didn't even know she was catching. So yeah, as soon as we knew that there wasn't enough content, we all just were like, oh, it's okay. We have this.
All the magic happens behind the camera.
Mm-hmm. It really does. It really does.
And that is it for part 1 here on Headstrong Season 3, Creatives in Conversation with Basma Khalifa. If you're enjoying the episode, go check out part 2, where we carry on much the same breath. If you're also enjoying this conversation, please do share the podcast with your family and friends, and also leave a review if you can. See you on part 2. Hello and welcome back to Headstrong Season 3, Creatives in Conversation with me, Louis Strong. You're listening to Episode 3, Part 2 with Basma Khalifa. Let's dive straight back in. When you went to Saudi Arabia, women had only been allowed to drive for 3 months, which is, of course, was a massive improvement from the world that Saudi Arabia had been living in. But there is still a hugely long way to go. Did your experiences there, only 6 days, but did it give you a different opinion on Saudi Arabia?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, totally. It's actually kind of chill. Like they have like really nice restaurants. The beach is really nice. People are exercising. The like little coffee shops are lovely. Like it. I don't know what I was expecting, but I thought I would be a lot more scared there than I was. I actually, it's not unlivable as a country. It's just very different. You just have to respect what they do and respect how they do it. I think maybe in hindsight, I would have not gone in as hot, and I would have been a bit more calmer with my approach. I mean, it's been like nearly a year and a half, and actually in reflection, I even think the power of timing that we just talked about, I would have done it differently now had I have learned more about being media trained and knowing how to deal with things in situations. But I didn't want to leave. I wanted to do the bodyboarding and the paddleboarding and go to the beaches and hang out with people. There were fun things to do. It's not that bad. But
No, no. I mean, you had so much planned as well for that next week that was going to be not just amazing content for the documentary, but actually stuff that you wanted to do and experience, which would have been so fundamental considering, as you say, you'd been building up to this for 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it was such a shame that it couldn't happen.
Yeah.
What was it like with because it was obviously government officials looking after you. I mean, that in itself is scary. I mean, I'm watching a TV show at the moment where like it's all about, government conspiracy and whatnot. And it's just incredibly interesting. Obviously, I don't want to talk about it too much, but but what is that experience like? Because you don't even know who the higher powers are, who is who. What was that experience like? Because you were being looked after, am I right? Just so for people who are listening, you were being looked after by officials who were allowing you to do certain things and not do certain things.
It was frustrating. I mean, and especially in a country like that, 4 men do not want to be answering to 2 young women, for sure. And we knew that, and they knew that. And there was that very tight barrier from day one. I mean, that scene where it's like, you shouldn't be wearing these clothes in the mall. Like that was, we'd only been there 4 or 5 hours, and it was already like heat from both ends. It was frustrating, but it was understandable. The country was at that stage just opening, just figuring it out, just trying to understand how they navigate. So I didn't hate it. It was just a few times a personality clash, I guess, with me wanting to be like British and be like, I want to do what I want to do, and then being like, well, it just doesn't work like that here. I wish that they would have trusted us more, but I understand why they didn't. So yeah, it was frustrating, if anything, and maybe, but understandable. I don't think it would be any different if I did that now. I think they would still give us government officials.
Sure. I mean, for anyone who hasn't seen it, by all means, go watch the documentary. It's still on BBC, I believe.
Yeah.
It's still on iPlayer. So anyone who hasn't seen it, I thoroughly recommend it. It's a great watch, and it's just a shame that we didn't get a longer version. But it is what it is, and it's still great. It's still a great film. So congrats on that. I really love it. But this brings us on to a topic that is extremely important at the moment in equality. Let's just talk about you and yourself as well at the moment. As you're from Sudan, you were born in Saudi Arabia, and you've had this incredible journey. But there is still certainly institutional racism throughout any country, Saudi Arabia, perhaps, and wherever. But in the UK, I just wanted to know what your experiences have been and what it's like living here as a Black woman.
Gosh, that's a very.
And I know that we could talk about this for another hour. Yeah. But I mean, just, whatever you want to say. But I'm just really, really curious what your experiences have been.
I think for me, and I can only, I obviously can speak on behalf of a lot of Black people and Black women, but personally for me, it's just more than anything exhausting. It's super, super exhausting to prove yourself and have to defend yourself and have to align yourself with everything that you do and every way that you walk in life. Obviously, with everything that's happened with the Black Lives Movement, things have sort of, I guess, shifted a little bit and sort of given Black people a bit more license to be themselves. But that only happened like a month ago or like 6 weeks ago. I think it's hard. It's really, really hard to constantly feel like you have to watch who you are and you have to be careful of who you are before you are slated, or you're told that, you know, you're not welcome, or you're told that you're not good enough. I mean, I have the double element of religion as well. And, you know, I'm not incredibly religious, but I still stand with having faith. And that in itself is hard when, you know, Muslims are not the favorite people in the world right now, or have ever been. And I just think being a Black woman in society now is still it's very touch and go. There's days where you're the flavor of the month, the flavor of the week, or the day, and everyone wants to speak to you, and you know your voice is important. But the problem with being Black and being a woman is that the way you look stands before your voice. And I will always be judged first on being Black and being a woman before I will be judged on the quality of the work I make. That's what's annoying. And that's why I think maybe having a white counterpart will never understand, because they will genuinely be judged on their merit.
Sure.
I guess that's how I can explain it.
No, that's really interesting. I think that is a massive issue as well. I mean, it's totally, you judge on appearance before merit, and that, I mean, it's another t-shirt slogan we could go for there. But no, it's a serious serious issue. I mean, have you ever thought about documenting that yourself? And I mean, there is no right answer as well to this. But how can we all start as a society to break that stigma and progress to a point where, you know, anyone can acknowledge people's work before judging on appearance?
Well, for me, honestly, and I say this in the most modest way, I'd assume most of your listenership is a white audience. And I think white people need to listen to Black people. I think they need to be open to listening and opening to learning and opening to wanting to know. Read the books, watch the movies. If you don't read, there's a bazillion movies on Netflix. There's a bazillion movies in the world. And I think that if you genuinely care, you'll go past saying, oh yeah, I know, I really care about this, I feel bad for them. You'll actually educate yourself. Because once you know the facts and you watch the figures and you align yourself a bit more, you'll understand that this is a humanity issue. This is not necessarily just a Black to white issue. I think I have a lot of white friends who, you know, at the beginning of the movement were like, you know, well, I'm not racist and I've never seen color. No, but if you haven't seen color, that's an issue, because you need to understand that color is the issue that I have. So to be my friend, I need you to see color so that you see a difference, because the minute you see color, you'll want to learn about my color and what that does. And I think white people need to be allies in the same way that you messaged me to say, hey, come on my podcast. I literally, when I got the request, I was like, well, you know what? I don't really know what a white male will want to do and talk to me about as a Black female. And then when I read what you'd written and the research you'd done, I'd be like, no, you know what? This is genuinely allyship. When you're like, I've done my research, I want to know and I want to learn. I was like, for that reason, great. I'm part of what you want to be part of, because I can tell that you care. So there's huge
difference. I mean,
research.
I think it wasn't. I don't want to put myself in that bracket where I say I've always cared, because I would like to think that I definitely have. But when the Black Lives Matter movement was at its kind of, you know, when it was dominating all the news channels, finally over coronavirus news and whatnot, it really sparked a change in a lot of my peers, certainly. But it allowed an opportunity for education, because there is no reason why this should not be in schools and this should be learnt about just as much as anything in our British history. This is of paramount importance today. So why are we not learning about it now?
Yeah. And I have to say that for someone like you, unfortunately or fortunately, you guys as white males in society right now do hold the keys. So it's up for people like you to be like, hey, we need to talk about this. And like for your peers to be sitting in a beer garden and being like, listen, what is going on? Like, this is mental. It takes you guys, because our voices are strong, but they're still not as strong. So that's what allyship, that's what that is, for you to be like, hey, and for your friends also who are just like, I want nothing to do with this, I don't really care, for you to be like, guys, watch this movie. Just watch this one movie and tell me what you think, and starting that conversation.
Definitely. I mean, just because you're here now, is there anything that anyone should is there something that someone should definitely watch or listen to that is just of paramount importance right now? I mean, it's going to really, just as a starting place.
There's some incredible documentaries and movies on Netflix, from like When They See Us, or The Get Out, if you want a bit more comedy, like, but not even comedy, like thriller comedy. Or if you want to read books like, books that would scare you, that are like Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, which would put most white people's back up against their walls and be like, well, I'm not picking up this book. So much information. It's such an important book. It's literally, I was on Netflix yesterday and there's a whole line that's just for Black content. If you really care, watch a documentary with your mate while you're drinking a beer. And then you know what? Don't just watch the documentary. Have a conversation about it. And then ask other people to have a conversation about it. Start the conversation going. So yeah, there's lots of resources now. We're on the world of social media. If you want to know, you'll look.
Definitely. So with Black Lives Matter falling during lockdown, you were in East London, I think, right?
Yeah, Elston, East London.
So did you go out and experience the marches?
To be honest, I went through a lot of trauma. Like, I was crying for 2 weeks straight. Like, I actually said to my friends last week, I regret not going to the marches, but I always find marches quite overwhelming. I get a bit claustrophobic, and I'm quite small and short, and I always find them a very overwhelming experience. And also, I just don't know that I had it in me emotionally. Me and my girlfriends were up most mornings crying on the phone to each other because we were just so sad that at the time I just didn't have it in me. I didn't have it in me to like consume more than social media. And obviously I was posting on social, so I was getting a lot of energy from those places as well. And I think that it was enough. On the gram was enough, on Facebook, on TV, it was all enough. That it was mid-COVID, and I was like, I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe anyway. And then we're in COVID, so it's like a double unsafety. Now, maybe I should have gone, but at the time, I just didn't have the willpower. So no, I didn't go.
I mean, I suppose you don't have to be present to still be experiencing the movement. I mean, I think that's something that's really important. You can have experienced the movement in isolation,
100%. And
I feel like the country has experienced it and will continue to. And I think it should have already happened, but it's a catalyst to spark more change and move and progress. So, but with the movement falling during lockdown, as you just said there, I mean, everyone dealt with the lockdown and isolation in their own unique way. But I think one thing that was kind of really interesting was that it affected a lot of people's mental health. Mm-hmm. And how much of an impact did perhaps the lockdown have on the movement? Do you think people, it had really contributed to it?
100%. The movement took on leaps and bounds because everyone's at home on their phones. I think if we were all on our normal day-to-day lives, out and running around and sitting in our Soho houses and our Shoreditch houses and living our best lives, I think we would have been like, oh, this is kind of mental, but like, whatever. But I think just like COVID and how extreme it got, this was the same thing. Like, it just took on leaps and bounds because everyone had time to sit with it. There was no escape, which is actually, in hindsight, though, rest in peace, George Floyd, the movement is because of, we were all here. We were all here watching. There was no way of getting away from it. Even if you wanted to try and get away from it, you couldn't get away from it. So, I definitely think I had an impact, for sure.
And how has it impacted you?
Funnily enough, I said to my mentor's Reggie Yates, and I said to Reggie the other day, it's like, how are you feeling? Because we've been sharing a lot of how we've both been feeling. And I was like, I feel like my identity is entrenched in fighting the good fight and fighting to be heard and fighting to be seen as a Black woman. Like, it's very weird that people want to see me now because that's part of my thing. The fight is part of my story. So if there's no fight, then who am I? And it's been about relearning that. Who am I if I don't have to fight to be me? And that's still something that's a little bit ongoing and I'm still trying to figure out. There's a lot of stuff that's come off the back of it from TV and, I would dare never say it, but why have I still want to get on TV again. I still want to make another documentary again. And will people listen? Will people want me to be part of conversations in the way I've been asking to? Maybe. So opportunities have opened, they would have not opened had Black lives not begun to matter more than they should have already. That's probably the thing.
And with the Black Lives Matter movement as well, I know that you've started kind of going to different shops and doing different things as well. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think supporting Black people is super important. Black-owned businesses of these young people who are just trying to do more and earn more and eating more Black food from Black-owned restaurants. And, I don't even think it needs to be a Black thing. I think in general, I have always cared about giving to the little person and giving to the one who's trying to start something. It's like you with this podcast. Even in your email, you said, well, I actually did get in touch last year, but now I'm getting in touch again. And like, you're trying to do something. And why shouldn't you help someone who's just on their own 2 feet, trying to make a difference, trying to start a conversation? So I think it's a lot for me over everything, whether you're the little man or not, and whether you're Black, white, or orange, it doesn't matter. It's about helping those who are trying to make a difference. So that's what I'm trying to do a lot more of, just being very purposeful with my movements.
I love it. I really like it as well. Part of your identity is certainly your religion, and not necessarily. I mean, I don't know what the balance and weight of your identity build up is, but I mean, Ramadan fell during lockdown as well.
Yeah.
How did this affect you as well?
Ramadan. So I actually, and I've never really publicly talked about it, so I probably won't. But I had some health issues.
That's fine.
And so I hadn't fasted in like 3 or 4 years. So this is my first Ramadan. My first Ramadan fasting, and it was so sad. It was like the saddest thing to not be with my family during Ramadan and to not be with them during Eid. But luckily, what was really nice about it is I actually got commissioned by Facebook and Instagram to create some incredible content that had like nice viral exposure. And off the back of that, I ended up doing like a lot of interviews and a lot of talks. And I'm naturally have been very uncomfortable talking about religion because just from September 11th onwards, I never felt comfortable being very openly Muslim. So I think that Ramadan was a real lesson for me in sort of being okay with being religious, which in the Black community, being religious is not a big deal. Everyone is a Christian or Muslim. It's just not a big deal. They're very God-fearing, very open about it. Whereas in the white community that I grew up in, it wasn't the case. No one really had a religion. So it was always like, why do you care about who God is? So it's been nice to sort of unscare myself and stop scaring myself in my own religion. So yeah, it was mental Ramadan during. It was sad. It was very sad.
For anyone who hasn't seen it, you created an amazing poem, and you did create some incredible content with some other creatives. So by all means, go check it out. I mean, that's on your socials.
Yeah,
feed,
on my IGTV, it'll be there.
So apart from during Ramadan, of course, but did isolation affect you mentally as well? Did you struggle with the months of lockdown and isolation, or were you pretty strong with it?
Listen, I relished. Just like,
Love it.
I really loved it. Not loved it, like, let's be honest. Like, I've missed my friends and missed my family. But in general, it's been really nice to not have to go to everything and not have to be everywhere and not have to be like, why didn't I get invited to this event? Why didn't I get invited to this dinner? Like, I don't care about any of that stuff, but I had to care. And now I'm like living. And I probably have more work and now more work this whole summer than I've ever had in like the whole of last year. I'm earning more money during lockdown than I've earned in the whole last year, which is ridiculous. So I think
I love it. Brilliant.
Like, listen, we can stay locked down. In my opinion, I won't go anywhere except for like.
I mean, yeah, as you say, it's an opportunity not only for work, but I think it was actually an opportunity for everyone to stop being a busybody and take a second to actually realize who they are and take a second to stop and breathe. Actually, no one ever takes a second, apart from maybe people who do yoga, but stop and actually just breathe and just go and just take a look around and pause and just experience things and just let your life.
Listen, Louis, even those yogis, they don't stop because you got to think about the next move. Don't act like you guys stop. Like, everyone's thinking about the next move, even a yogi. I definitely think. And also, I became a director in lockdown. I was never a director pre-lockdown. Suddenly, I'm now a director, and people are commissioning me to do really big directing projects. That's wasn't my plan, but that's
That was my That does bring me on to my next question. Whether you're allowed to say or not, I don't know. But what are you currently working on, and
Oh
what
God,
might we be able to see?
don't even know if I'm allowed to say it, but without saying the name of the brand, I am directing my first short doc. It'll be 6-7 minutes long. That will be for a very big brand. And it will be
Bleep.
it'll be coming out towards, I guess, second week of September. And then I'm also creating another thing for another brand that will be coming out the first week of September. So this summer is like my poor producer. Even that's even weird saying that, my producer. I've never had a team, and now I've got a producer, a director of pictures, an editor. Between the three of us, August is going to be. I don't have a day off, not even the weekends. I'm working every single day until the 14th of September. But two huge projects. Well, the main project, the short doc that I'm directing, that wouldn't have happened pre-lockdown. So
Fantastic.
yeah, I'm very, very lucky. If anything, and this comes into, I guess this comes into like trusting your own belief. Like, I still think about this doc that I'm making, and I just think, how did I get myself here? How is a big brand like this trusting me to put this together? This will be my directorial debut. Yes, the Ramadan things I did, but that isn't the same as this. This is a biggie. And power of timing, I have to say. It's what we talked about.
Sounds amazing. I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, me too.
Very, very excited. I've got my thoughts on potentially what brands that might be. The thing that I'd written down next was to talk about being a creative in the current climate, but it sounds like you're thriving. I mean, it's not even worth, it sounds like you're the busiest. I mean, share some of the work by all means. If you want to pass it my way, that'd be great.
I will do, because, I have to say, at this point, I don't know. Listen, I think one thing I would say, and for anyone that's listening, is that being multifaceted means that if something slows down, there's something else you can pick up. And I think that's what's important. Currently, as of the last 2-ish years, 3-ish years maybe, I'm now a stylist, a writer, a director, a filmmaker, a journalist. And, to be all those things at once is really tough, but it means that I have all these avenues of ways of making money and ways of outlets. So I'd say for any creative, obviously perfect your craft, but don't be scared of delving into other things. Be multifaceted, be able to do them all, because they all marry together in the end. So yeah.
Of course. I mean, you've got, as you say, you've got so many parts there that you are able to create income, but that's what's frustrating, that it comes down to income. What it would be amazing to be about is if we were all able to just make the content that was actually needed and needed to be seen, as opposed to, at the end of the day, a white male commissioning the work or not.
Yeah. That
is, I mean, that's again, another conversation that could go on for hours.
But that's also called YouTube. You know what? In the end, if your content's good and it bangs, it'll be on YouTube and people can watch it, and you will make money from the affiliate links. Like, you'll make you can definitely still make money from making your own content. I've got a guy who's incredible that you should look him up, called Nader Nahdi, and he makes docs on YouTube, and they're beautifully made, like to the point where I was like, this is TV quality. It's on YouTube. And he's building his own platform. Yeah, it takes longer than the white male giving you the keys and giving you the money, but I didn't make that much money from my documentary, to be perfectly honest. I just got more opportunities from it. So don't think that that's the only way to go.
Exactly. I think, again, it's one of those things. Opportunities can almost be as good as, if not better than, the monetary gains of what you do.
Yeah.
We're coming down to the end of our time, Basma, but I ask this question to every single person that comes on the podcast. And the question is, what does the word headstrong mean to you?
Oh, what does the word headstrong mean to me? Does that make sense? Headstrong, I think, for me, means knowing yourself. Because once you are headstrong, I think you can be a force to be reckoned with. But I also think being headstrong means knowing when to say, I need help. It's knowing when to say, I can't do this. And it's knowing when to say, I'm pretty incredible at what I do. So it's multifaceted. I think being headstrong is multifaceted. And you know what, Louis? I think you're headstrong. I think you've tapped into something, and you said that you want to be part of a bigger conversation. I think, as we talked about in this conversation, you as a white male could very easily be like, "Bah, I'm cool, I'm comfortable, I'm chill, I have my life." But you've said, no, there's more. There's more to this, and I can make positive change, and that's part of being headstrong.
Well, thank you. I honestly, I'm so grateful that you've given up about an hour of your time to speak to me. I think we've had a really, really good conversation. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Late. I feel like I was just sitting here like, doing my own thing and waiting for me.
Well, I suppose that's the best thing. I mean, when conversations can just occur, that's the best. Yeah. And that concludes this third episode of Headstrong with Basma Khalifa. I just want to say a huge thank you to Basma. I think we had a really, really great conversation. I really enjoyed talking about identity, voice, exploring that documentary, and of course what it means to be a black woman at this stage in our lives. I also want to say a huge thank you to you, the listener, for tuning in constantly, week in, week out, or even if you're a new listener, thank you so much for coming to check it out. I've got all my other episodes up on the streaming platform that you're listening to right now. So if you want to go listen to them, please feel free to do so. Come and join me next Monday for another episode of Headstrong Season 3, where I'm sitting down with actor Wade Williams. Have a great week and stay headstrong.